Good afternoon, everyone. How long would it take before the explanation of the all-time record cold was caused by global warming? Coldest temperatures ever are because warmest temperatures ever. And the all-time record cold, minus 45 degrees below zero in the United States. About 500 new locations, all-time coldest ever recorded since the 1860s. The article never talks about the magnetic North Pole in its wandering phase. They never go back and show you from 200 AD how the magnetic poles shifted. It's all about the magnetosphere, Earth's magnetic field, and how our jet streams are locked in because of that's very tight when the sun's active. The article says that you are a bad polluter with your CO2. You're making these powerful winds miles above the Earth change their course. They never talk about no solar wind, or the planetary geometry 79 AD on the left and then quickly approaching 2024 on the right, these types of matchups. The astrophysicists that are forecasting intense grand solar minimum amplification. Right here's the timeline fitting exactly what we should be expecting with cooler temperatures. The article never goes back 12,000 years and looks at the fluctuation in Earth's natural temperature variation. And what I see from the GFS model compared to the modern minimum temperature reconstruction on the right is a pretty good match. So when articles like these come out saying CO2 is responsible for the record cold, it's almost like me saying, hey, this eclipse is caused by CO2. And don't you remember back in the 1990s, they said we were going to boil like frogs in a pot, snow would be a thing of the past, and every winter's going to get warmer and milder. And if you're looking for other video platforms backing up Adapt 2030 video series, BitChute, Brighteon, putting some new listings up on Gab, Adapt 2030, also minds.com/Adapt 2030. Steam it so everything's cataloged on the blockchain in a written form. And if you're looking for grand solar minimum resources, a full page on oilseedcrops.org, listed by category, over 120 links and resources for you to understand more about the grand solar minimum. Remember, just a week ago, all-time record cold across the United States and some of the coldest places in America broke their all-time low records, looking at 60 degrees Fahrenheit below zero in some places, 45 degrees below zero in others. And I stated that it'll probably be about a week and you'll see a tidal wave of articles trying to explain that the global warming is causing the record cold. And luckily, one of my subscribers sent this link. Great find. I'm so glad you pointed me in the right direction to find this. Polar vortex, how the jet stream and climate change bring on cold snaps. Now again, the cold snap is not a correct description of that last event. All-time record cold wave would be a better description. It might seem counterintuitive, but global warming plays a role in blast of bitter cold weather. You know what? That is counterintuitive because I just don't understand how that happens. Thermodynamically, it makes no sense to me. But the article goes on and tries to explain that because of melting sea ice and warming of the Arctic, more open water leads to these feedback loops which creates a wavier jet stream. And I thought, okay, let's look at the Arctic sea ice currently. And as you can see, the black line is where we are, 2019. So if they're claiming that the sea ice is melting and causing more open water, which it shouldn't because it's winter anyway, where are we on the sea ice comparatively to the last few years? So 2019, the black line, we're right back to the 2004-2013 average. So I don't know really where they get the whole melting premise in there because it's actually gaining ice in the Arctic. Inconvenient fact, but nonetheless. Then the article continues on. An analysis of the December 2017, early 2018 East Coast. They call it a cold snap, but again, it was all-time record cold, all-time record snowfall event. But then they quickly analyze it and say the cold spells aren't getting as cold as they could because of climate change and greenhouse gases, because of the Arctic amplification. Cold air coming down south is not as cold as it used to be. And then I'll say, really? By the numbers, Midwest endures coldest temperatures ever. We're talking places like Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota. These are some of the coldest places in the winter in the United States, smashing their records. Even at one point during the storm, before they analyzed everything with a final tally about a week later because they were looking for independent stations to add thermometer data into, they still had 340 daily lows and 340 daily low maximum temperatures broken or tied in the Midwest, just in that single polar vortex. It's not getting warmer, it's getting cooler. And case in point, over this last weekend, another polar blast, all the way down to Texas. And moving in through the 21st, it's going to be more intense. It's going to be cooler. These averages are 16, 20 degrees Celsius below the normal temperatures. Astrophysicists are forecasting for us to go into a grand solar minimum, meaning that our sun is declining in its activity state, and that will usher in changes in our jet streams due to our magnetosphere weakening. You need a lot of solar wind to keep that magnetosphere tight to lock the jet streams in place. I mean, here's the forecast that they've even put out a couple of years ago as the amplification expected. And these lines here are broken down by yearly increments in the first wave of 2 that we're about to experience. Right at the yellow where we move to the green, that's the amplification expected in cold events on our planet this year. You can see there's a gigantic uptick at the beginning of 2019 moving into 2020. And then again, it upticks from 2020 to 21. Somehow these facts were overmissed in the rush to say winters are going to be warmer and jet streams are affected by you, bad humans, from CO2. Again, the article never pointed out anything about planetary geometry. You know, these gas giants magnetically have an effect on our Earth. They have an effect on the sun. It's an electromagnetic solar system that we're in. Everything affects everything else. So when you look at the left side, that is 79 AD planetary geometry, where the gas giants were in relationship to the Earth. And on the right side, 2023, 2024, we see some exact matchups. I mean, nearly identical to where the gas giants make that square, and the Earth is straight in the center there. Affected so many ways, not only by our sun, but the gas giants on the outer bands there. Magnetic poles were not mentioned in the article either. The magnetic poles are wandering, as they call it, so the GPS needed to be reset this year. Also, so many runways needed to be demarcated as to which direction, because look how much the magnetic North Pole is wandering. And you might go, oh no, frightening, that's scary, look what's happening, I'm so scared. You shouldn't be. It's a natural phenomenon. Again, it's a natural cycle. I'll take you up to 200 AD, top left. That's the same direction that the magnetic pole is wandering toward, right over Russia. Same direction. 79 AD. Same planetary geometry. Do you think there's a coincidence going on here, or do you think it's a repeating pattern? Also, the article never goes back in and talks about longer duration time frames. They're always focused on that satellite record or something right in the 50-year, 100-year time frame. What about the last 12,000 years? Look at the intensity of change that our planet has endured naturally, long before CO2, long before factories, long before cars. The natural undulations in heat spikes and cold downtrends is natural. We're just heading into another downtrend at the moment, naturally. It's all about our magnetosphere. It's about the electromagnetic coupling between our poles and the sun. And they very boldly state that human-caused global warming has altered the strength and the path of the powerful winds, otherwise known as the jet stream. Jet stream is weakened. They even come out cleanly and say it. But the causation, this is where we want to talk about. This article never talked about solar wind. This is a huge component in the dynamic into what's happening on our planet. And get you a better representation here, this is strong solar wind. No solar wind. This is happening right now. So you can understand the changes in our atmosphere are related to what's happening with our sun. Magnetic field lines coming in on our poles, otherwise known as field-aligned currents, which locks our magnetosphere tightly, and in turn, the jet streams get locked in place with nice flows. So what if the media comes clean and actually tells you the sun is the driver, and as the sun decreases its activity state, our weather is going to get more extreme? You can see how the magnetic field lines would weaken and go out of their flow if you had less of a connecting source. So to put it in perspective, this declining solar activity over 400-year cycles or 2,000-year cycles or 3,600-year cycles affects this. and this in turn locks the jet streams in place. And then when we see weaker solar winds, we go from compression into expansion, and here's another really good representation. Smash-O-Mash puts these together daily. Solar wind, no solar wind. This is not normal. It's happening right now. You can check out this space weather ultra weak solar activity. Indoor tomato total reaches 3. Weak magnetosphere. It's all coupling. And then if there were electromagnetic changes, we should start to see more unusual atmospheric lightning events like all the sprites that are being spotted around the planet. It's not coincidental that these are all coupled together. And the historical cold that swept all the way to the East Coast, including the Great Lakes, which they say, hey, the temperature stations were registering 20 degrees Fahrenheit, much too warm. And then all these new weather fronts coming down from February 9th through the 15th, 16th. And more plunging cold temperatures all the way down to southern Mexico this time. Even out into the middle of the month, back down to Texas. Bringing it into the 16th again. Look at the cold going to sweep through Florida. You can actually see the leading edge of the jet stream there where it's bent in the wrong direction. The orientation's off on where the jet stream should be. It's not CO2, it's the sun. Here's another glimpse of it. You can see it pushing all the way out into the Atlantic. It should be more of a north-south orientation versus east-west. And this is why we're seeing in Europe these same exact mix-ups with their jet streams as well. Extreme heat against extreme cold in a north-south orientation. And that was back on the 1st of February. So then I started to overlap some of these GFS model here along with the Maunder minimum temperature reconstruction on the right side. Now this is where the temperature changed according to over 2,000 peer-reviewed studies, during the Maunder minimum with precipitation and temperature. Now, the GFS model on the left, I would just put this into a pause mode for a second and see if you see any similarities in terms of the cold. Like for me, right over Alaska, that's where the heat is. Right through the central U.S., parts of Canada, that's exactly where the cold was. A little bit south of Greenland, right there you got that heat pocket again. Right through the middle of the Arctic, just like you see, cold. North Africa, cold. I mean, 90% of this map here for the Maunder minimum temperature reconstruction matches with today's GFS models. Yet nothing's taken into consideration to even look into the past and see if there's some similarity that we should be talking about to protect our food source. Because back in the 1990s, when this thing first all started, this global warming hype, it was only about we're going to boil like frogs in a pot. Purely. The science was settled back then too, so I don't know how they can really with a straight face come out and tell you, science was settled in the 1990s and we told you we would boil like frogs in a pot, your kids would never know what snow was, and every winter was going to get milder and shorter because the summers were going to be longer. And now they flip everything into, well, we told you the heat was going to cause record cold. No, you didn't. You flipped the narrative. The science has never settled, never was, never will be. So I'm wondering what's next. Are they going to say the eclipses are caused by CO2, and if we put a global CO2 tax in, we can change the color of the moon back? Because it's all your fault, polluting humans. And during these uncertain times, I've teamed up with My Patriot Supply long-term food storage. A nice, affordable starter kit. 2-week food supply, 1,500 calories per day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinners, plus the 4-gallon storage containers included in that. This is a good first step in getting more self-sufficient. And if you click through the Prepare with ADAPT 2030 page in My Patriot Supply, you can get this starter kit for $75. Please remember there's a limit of 2 per household in this special offer. Thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of the video. If you like more information like this, 30 minutes at a time on the go, Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast, anywhere podcasts are hosted across the net.